He fed 2 orphan girls a warm meal. 10 years later, a luxury spaceship appeared at his door. The winter of 2045 had been particularly brutal in the outer districts of New Chicago. Thomas Reeves, a middle-aged salvage worker with weathered hands and kind eyes, sat at his modest kitchen table in the converted warehouse he called home. He was ladling hot soup into bowls when he heard the sound, soft crying, barely audible above the wind that howled through the industrial sector. He froze, spoon suspended over the steaming pot. The orphanages had been defunded years ago, and street children had become an unfortunate fixture of the abandoned neighborhoods. Thomas knew he couldn't save everyone, but something in that cry tugged at something deep within him. He set down his spoon and moved toward the reinforced window. 2 small figures huddled in the doorway across the street. Even through the darkness and snow, he could make out their thin frames and the desperate way they clung to each other. They couldn't have been more than 8 or 9 years old. Thomas didn't think. He simply grabbed his coat and the entire pot of soup, along with a loaf of bread he'd baked the day before. "Come here," he called out gently, keeping his voice low and non-threatening. The girls hesitated, their eyes reflecting the street light like scared animals. "It's warm. Come inside, just for a moment." The taller one, with her blonde hair matted against her face, took a tentative step forward. She whispered something to the smaller dark-haired girl, and they both approached cautiously. Thomas held the door open wider, and they slipped inside, shaking and trembling. "Sit," he said, gesturing to the 2 chairs by his table. "What are your names?" "I'm Alira," the blonde girl said softly, her accent unfamiliar to Thomas. "This is my sister, Cammy. We're not from here." Thomas felt his stomach tighten. They weren't local, their features, their accent, something about them seemed different. But he pushed the questions aside and focused on ladling soup into bowls for them. The girls attacked the food with a hunger that spoke of days without proper nourishment. He watched them eat, noting how Alira made sure Cammy received the largest portions, how she acted more like a mother than a sister despite being barely older herself. "Where are your parents?" Thomas asked gently. Alira and Cammy exchanged a glance. "Gone," Alira said finally. "Our ship crashed. The rescue team separated us, and we got lost in the city. We've been trying to find the ambassador's office. But..." "Your ship?" Thomas interrupted, his eyebrows rising. "We're from the Andromeda Collective," Cammy said quietly, her accent becoming more pronounced as her fear diminished slightly. "We were supposed to meet with your world leaders. But something went wrong with our descent, and by the time we got out of the wreckage, everyone was gone. We think they thought we didn't survive." Thomas could have dismissed this as the desperate fantasy of traumatized children, but something in their sincerity stopped him. Instead, he nodded slowly. "You'll stay here tonight. You can sleep in the back room, and tomorrow we'll figure this out together." Neither girl argued. They were asleep within an hour of finishing their meal, curled up on the makeshift bed Thomas had prepared. He sat by the window, looking out at the snow and wondering if he'd just harbored fugitives or helped 2 lost alien children find shelter. Either way, he knew he couldn't turn them over to authorities. Something in his heart told him these children were worth protecting. Over the next week, Thomas juggled keeping his salvage job while caring for Alira and Cammy. The girls were intelligent and kind, desperate to help around the warehouse despite their trauma. They taught him basic phrases in their language, and they asked endless questions about Earth, about his life, his work, why humans seemed so disconnected from one another. He found their perspective both sobering and oddly hopeful. But he knew the situation couldn't last forever. News reports had mentioned a downed alien vessel in the industrial sector, but there was nothing about missing alien children. Thomas used his limited computer access to search, but he found nothing concrete. After 2 weeks, He made the difficult decision to contact the authorities anonymously, leaving the girls' location in a message at a public terminal and hoping they would be reunited with their people safely. He never learned what happened after that. The authorities came and took the girls away while he was at work. He'd agonized over the decision every day since, wondering if he'd done the right thing. But he'd known he couldn't keep them hidden forever, and their people deserved to know they were safe. 10 years passed. Thomas was 46 now, his hair graying at the temples, his back aching from a decade of salvage work. He'd never married, never left the industrial sector. His life had settled into a quiet routine of work, simple meals, and long evenings reading in his warehouse apartment. The two girls had become a bittersweet memory, something he thought about on lonely nights and wondered about during the long winters. On a cold December evening, a sound unlike anything he'd ever heard brought him to his window. A ship, sleek, impossibly elegant, and far larger than any human vessel, descended through the snow clouds. It landed with surprising gentleness in the street directly in front of his warehouse. The hull was midnight blue with patterns of bioluminescent light that pulsed with an almost heartbeat-like rhythm. Thomas's first instinct was to hide, but something stopped him. He moved to his door and opened it just as a ramp lowered from the ship's side. Two women walked out. Alira and Cami were no longer children. Alira was tall and composed, wearing the formal dress of what Thomas could only assume was a diplomat or high-ranking official. Cami stood beside her, equally impressive in bearing though her uniform seemed to denote a different role, security or military, perhaps. But their faces were unmistakable. Thomas Reeves, Alira said, her accent refined now but still carrying that familiar lilt. We've been searching for you for a very long time. Thomas found he couldn't speak. Tears unexpectedly filled his eyes. You don't understand what you did for us, Cami continued, stepping forward. When you sheltered us, when you fed us and protected us, you changed the trajectory of our entire civilization's relationship with Earth. The collective had been hesitant about formal contact, but the kindness you showed, the simple humanity of it, convinced the Council that your species was worth knowing. We're here as ambassadors now, Alira added. We've spent the last decade building relationships, establishing treaties, preparing for open diplomatic relations. And none of it would have been possible without you. You helped us survive when you had every reason not to trust us. Thomas stepped out into the snow, the cold air sharp against his face. I couldn't let you starve. That's exactly the point, Alira said softly. In a universe often consumed by self-interest and survival at all costs, you chose compassion. Our people have not forgotten. We came here to tell you, humanity has friends now. You have friends, and your kindness will echo through the stars for generations to come. The two women embraced him, and Thomas finally understood that sometimes the smallest acts of goodness carry consequences far beyond what we can ever imagine. One warm meal, one night of shelter, had been enough to change everything. Behind them, the ship's lights pulsed gently in the falling snow, a beacon of a future where humans were no longer alone in the universe, and it had all begun with soup and bread on a winter night, when one man simply chose to care.